Hi guys, so today I wanted to talk about TSM. It's been a few weeks since they lost in the group stages and underperformed at Worlds, and I think everyone's calmed down. We've had some time to reflect, and the initial emotional disappointment and upset about their underperformance is settled, and we've started to see some more rational discussions around them. Monty and Thorin have come out with good videos talking and praising TSM, and I kind of wanted to reflect on what TSM has accomplished this year, their failure at the end, but their success throughout the year. I'm not going to necessarily analyze the games at Worlds, but I do want to make a point. I think a lot of people have been dismissing TSM and saying that they failed and all this investment and everything for them not to get out of group stages. That ultimately they did all of that and they got the same result as G2, and that's as good. But I think to compare them to G2 or CLG or other teams that didn't make it out of groups and who didn't make that investment is a little bit of a shallow analysis. We have to acknowledge that TSM was placed in probably the closest group in a skill margin wise. We also have to reflect that TSM beat Samsung in one of their games. They went 1-1. And the game they won against Samsung, they won convincingly. So they showed that they can really, if they're playing their game, they can perform against the best teams. And their losses to RNG weren't blowouts. Again, it's just another indication that TSM could perform. Different people underperformed, and as a team, they just weren't playing well. I felt like their drafts went well, didn't go well, and I felt like it wasn't executed, which is a shame. And ultimately, I really wish they had gone further, and I understand the disappointment. It is a disappointment, and it is lower. They ended up much lower than they should have, in my opinion. But we can't dismiss these other factors, and I think if we're going to really reflect and analyze on their performance at Worlds, and especially if we're comparing to other teams, we need to consider that. But what I want to do is, I'm acknowledging that TSM set the bar for top 4. They failed. All the work and everything to not get out of groups is a failure. But they need to reflect on that, why, what happened, and they need to move forward. Because they did come into Worlds with a rookie in Biofrost, and it was also the first Worlds for Haunter. So these are things to consider, the team needs to consider them, but I really hope they don't stop what they've started this year, because I have been so excited to see TSM on this journey throughout this year, and I'm in a way even more excited to see what they could achieve next year. And I think for me to really explain why I feel this way, why I think TSM has been a successful team despite their failure at Worlds, is you need to look back at the start of the year. They brought together a super team that comprised of, Hornser, Svenskeren, Bjergsen, Doublelift, and Yellowstar. Now, Yellowstar didn't fit into the team. They had different approaches of playing, and it ended up that he departed. They replaced him with Biofrost. But in that spring split, there was one team that's better than everyone else. Immortals. They dominated the regular season of spring split. Convincingly. But they lost in playoffs to TSM. Now, we went then to the next split, and the most dominant team was no longer Immortals. It was TSM. By far. They beat Immortals twice. They beat the other teams. They were better than everyone. And to pretend like this didn't happen is a real dismissal of all the effort, commitment, hard work that TSM put in, and the sacrifice they all made. I think if we look at the players, just to start with, they stopped streaming. And we're talking about Bjergsen and Doublelift, who get 20,000 streamers at a time. Viewers at a time, which creates a significant amount of revenue. And the number of viewers that they had, because they weren't streaming, they got less viewers, which affected the sponsors. So Reggie had to go out and get more people on the TSM network to make up for this. They potentially could have lost or had a reduction in their sponsorship revenue. Not only this, but Reggie invested a significant amount of money to relocate Weldon Green to North America. All for competitive success. This was not a revenue-making scheme. They could have been at the top just off pure talent, but they didn't want to just be the top, they wanted to be one of the best in the world. And I think this hype has built to some of the resentment and why, when they didn't succeed, people have been so disappointed. But they're overlooking the fact that this is a real sacrifice that the team made and a real commitment that they made. And Weldon Green came in and he pushed them. He made them work harder than everyone else. Not just smarter, but harder. And the team complied. You didn't hear bad stories about them. And, Weldon Green has also been getting a bit of flack for some of his comments and training methods. People going, well, why did you have to do all of this when at the end of the day you didn't get what you wanted, which was top 4 at Worlds? But those people are forgetting how good TSM was in the summer split. They were better than every other team in North America. No one was close to them. And that is, you can't dismiss that Weldon Green was a big part of that. But those people are also forgetting that this was only 3 months of practice. We had the post from Jat at the start of Worlds talking about how the gap between Korea and the rest of the regions was getting smaller. Now, Korea has 3 teams in the semi-finals, their best ever result, and people are laughing and saying that no, the gap isn't closing. But those people are overlooking the fact that Korea has been doing this for years. And TSM is the only team, to my knowledge, who has done and committed to a type of regimen that Korean players do. And they've only done it for 3 months. Now, those 3 months allowed them to be so dominant in North America. Imagine what they could do with another year. Now imagine, what if other teams emulated them? What if other players started practicing and playing and taking the game as seriously and as committed and worked as hard as the TSM players? How good would North America look? How good would Europe look? If one team can improve a region like Fnatic of 2015 or Immortals of 2016, they could elevate the play of a whole region. Imagine if a whole region was so committed to playing like TSM was. What would the results be? And that is how we catch up to Korea. That is how the gap is closed. But the thing about it that we need to acknowledge also is that Korea's been doing this for years. We talk about Samsung and they're doing so well, and they are. But it's taken them 2 years to get to this point. ROX Tigers, who's considered the favorite of the world and the best team in the world, with the best player, some are saying, in SMEB, in the whole world, didn't win anything for 2 years. Last year, they were coming second and third in the regular season and playoffs. In 2015, they came second. In the spring split of this year, they came second. And they only won in the summer split. It's taken them 2 years to get to this point. SMEB was considered the worst player, top lane player in Korea. And now he is considered the best player in the world. But how long did it take him to get there? And this is what I'm talking about, is that we are quick to jump and go, well, Korea's just so much better, and why even bother? But Koreans got to that point because they follow a system, they have an infrastructure, they're working towards it. And there are reasons why they're able to do that other regions cannot necessarily emulate. But the point is to kick TSM or to dismiss all the hard work, all the great things they have done to try and compete on a world stage is insane. Because they trained like Koreans. They practiced. And they were so far ahead of everyone else in the Western regions, in my opinion. And I think in a lot of people's opinions. Now they stumbled. And you will stumble. It's very hard to get a perfect split. You will fail. You will drop games. You will make mistakes. No one is perfect. We have to remember that even Faker didn't make it to Worlds one year. And underperformed at an MSI. And didn't win the summer split this year. Despite how great they're looking at Worlds, they still fell in the playoffs in the first round. It happens. Even the very best fall. And TSM fell, and they failed, and it's not an excuse. It's not we shouldn't just, make an excuse and move on. It needs to be acknowledged they didn't succeed. But we need to acknowledge how great it was that they tried, and how committed they were. And I hope that other teams see how good TSM were in this, regular season, and try to emulate. Because that is really how we catch up to Korea. And it's not going to happen in 3 months. It's going to take a year or 2 years. Our infrastructure is getting there. It's getting better than ever. The players are playing better than ever. And when we get people like Huni and Reignover in, it elevates the quality of play style. When we get people like Ryu or Febevin from Homegrown Talent, or when we have players like Bjergsen, you have to play better because of them. It's incredible and it's wonderful. But us as fans, we need to support them whether they succeed or fail. We need to support the concept and the purpose behind these objectives. If we really want the Western regions to be able to compete with Korea, and not just a flash in the pan, not just, why would we care if we win MSI or we win Worlds once, but then it never happens again? We get lucky. We want long-term success, but to build that, you need a strong foundation. You know, as Yamato Cannon says about Splice, they went from relegations to second place in Europe. But it took them a year. And he said he had 5 pillars, the players with the support, and he had to build it up, and it took time. And that is something we need to acknowledge about TSM. And we need to encourage them to continue this. And we need to encourage other teams to emulate them. As a fan of esports, as a fan of Western teams, as a fan of League of Legends, I want the most competitive game possible. I want to see the gap get closer. And the way that will happen is if other teams emulate TSM and TSM continues to do what it did. That is how we catch up to the Koreans. We are catching up bit by bit. But this is how we make significant strides. And I'm really excited to see if this is how TSM can be so dominant in 3 months. I'm so excited to see how dominant they would be of a year of practice. How dominant would other teams be? What other teams would really jump up and elevate their level of play? And as a fan, I want to support TSM despite this failure. I want to support the whole esports. I want to support League of Legends teams that want to pursue this avenue of competitive success. And this is something that people, I think, need to remember. Is that there was one failure, but that doesn't erase a whole year and split of success. And the ethos and the purpose behind the practice and investment and sacrifice and hard work that TSM put in. And it's something I believe needs to really be acknowledged and celebrated, ultimately. I hope this has given you something to think about, and I'd love to see your comments down below. If you liked it, please subscribe, and look forward to speaking to you soon.